Hello, and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Anna Allred, and I'll be your host for this webinar. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments, insights, and questions. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar will be on June 9th with Catherine Grant on 5 minutes or 5 hours, stopping mistakes before they start a family tree. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from James Baker, who will be giving a presentation on the 50 things you need to know about DNA. James Baker has been an active genealogist for the past 15 years. In 2011, he completed the Board for Certification of Genealogists requirements to become a board-certified genealogist, with a specialty in German genealogy research. He also specializes in Midwest U.S., early American research, and DNA. He was an officer of the Sacramento German Genealogy Society and contributed numerous articles to its quarterly publication, Der Blumenbaum. He also wrote articles for the National Genealogical Society magazine and the NGS Quarterly. He volunteered for over 10 years at the Sacramento Regional Family History Library. He has presented a total of 9 webinars for Legacy Family Tree and for the Southern California Genealogy Jamboree communities. Beginning in 2012, he has given over 400 presentations to over 50 genealogy societies at local, regional, and national genealogy events. Mr. Baker earned a PhD in sociology and social psychology from the University of Utah. He is retired from an aerospace and business management career. In his work career, he consulted for many large companies, including Boeing, General Electric, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. He has been an adjunct professor of sociology at UCLA and USC. His most fun job was being the piano man at Shakey's Pizza Parlor. And if you're ready, we will turn the time over to you.
Is it my turn, Anna?
Yep, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Now let's see, what button do I push here?
You hit share screen at the bottom.
Okay, I've got it. And there, I think that's the one I want.
Yes, it is.
Slideshow from the beginning. Slideshow from the beginning. And I think it's got what we want. All right. That is the topic today. This is kind of like a fairly basic class. This presumes that you've been kind of at least somewhat familiar with DNA. You've played around with it at least some, and you want to get a little bit better at it. And so this is going to, in a way, cover the waterfront about all the things that may be the important things, certainly, that you need to know. That's just a slide that shows that we're in the DNA world today. First question, we're going to have 50 of them. Does DNA really help you? And the answer is, I know in my case, it works. I've heard a lot of other success stories. It might break down some brick walls for you. It might give you some surprise results, and it might help you to, at least at minimum, to verify or clarify the paper tree that you've been working on for years. There's a picture of my mother's side of the house, that circle, kind of a fan chart, and I'm just noting here that there are several areas where it was DNA that did the job. In some cases, I was stuck in the hills of West Virginia or Tennessee or somewhere, but with DNA, I've been able to figure out and extend the family tree in several of these different areas. And so I've marked down some successes there. What kind of DNA tests? There are three different major ones. The Y test, that's the old time first test that was developed, and the Mito and the autosomal. Let's talk briefly about each one. Here's a picture of what you're going to get out of the Y test. You get information, and only the male can take it. So that's why it says male child there. And of course, being a child, you might be an adult, but for purposes of this, you're considered a child, because that means you're going to get information about your father, his father, his father, his father, and all the rest of them. So that's what you get with that one. And then marked in pink, here is the mitochondrial test and those comparable results for your mother, her mother, her mother, and either the male or female can actually take that test. Now here's the three big tests, all kind of formulated in this diagram. I have put my great-grandfather in the center of this. See, he lived way back when. He's born in the 1800s. If I want to know about his father, that blue line, the left-hand blue line, that's what you get from the Y test. If you want to know about his mother, her mother, her mother, I should have probably marked that in pink, but that right-hand arrow is what you get the information from your mitochondrial test. Everybody else, all of the other mothers, fathers, grandparents, all the rest of them, you get information for them using the autosomal test. And indeed, that probably represents maybe 95% or more of all of your ancestors. Now, which test should you take? It's an easy answer, or maybe there is no easy answer, because it depends. It's what are you interested in? If you are only interested in your own direct surname line, the Y test is the one for you. Similarly, if for some reason you're only interested in going back in your female line, that's the Mito. I figure most of us, most of the time, are going to be interested in the autosomal that will give us that larger group, and that's why I've put 5 stars by that one. Which company do you want to use to take the test? Well, for some of them, it's an easy answer. If it's the Y or the Mito, FTDNA is the only game in town. If you are interested in the autosomal, now you've got some choices. So, you know, if you have a lot of money, go ahead and take all of them, and you might find different people who also took tests in that particular one. But now I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to answer the question, which is really the best company for the autosomal? And the answer is Ancestry, because it's a simple answer. They've got by far, very, very, very far, the largest number of matches. You can see that I have maybe 3 times as many on Ancestry as I do on MyHeritage, and the others are just really small in comparison, which is not to say you couldn't get some good out of those, but certainly Ancestry is the one that is most likely to help you the most. And then my bottom bullet here, just to clinch this one, it is working with Ancestry. That's where I have found my major and some minor successes with very little, a minor, modest amount of help from the other companies. So that's why we like Ancestry so well. Now, here is something that is useful that I want you to be sure to know. And this is absolutely the best strategy for testing. Now, if you've already started, you work with what you've got. But if you're a newcomer, here's what you do. You start off, you pay the freight, and you sign up with Ancestry. They're always having a sale. It seems like there's never more than 3 or 4 weeks that go by that they don't have a sale. You can always get a sale. Then once you're in the club with Ancestry, you can push a few buttons and for free, you can transfer your results to FTDNA, also to MyHeritage, and also to Gedmatch. All of that is free. Now, it's not quite free. I think there's a nominal charge if you want to use all of their bells and whistles, like $18 or $20 or something. 23andMe just strictly has their own club. They don't do transfers. How much do I pay? Well, I've kind of started you off on that one. For the Y or the Mito, it's just whatever FTDNA is charging, but look for a sale. And for autosomal, I told you what to do there. And then to transfer that data, the data transfers themselves are free. All right, you sign up, let's say, with Ancestry or with another one. And how long does it take? Well, it might be 4 or 5 weeks. It has been perhaps longer during this last difficult year. For data transfers, you're already in, you've already got it, say, with DNA, and you're transferring to MyHeritage. That's fast. It will take about 24 hours for them to massage the data and get it all into their system. Now, who do you want besides yourself to take the DNA test? If you have an oldest living relative, they're still good for DNA. And they, because they are 1 generation, maybe closer, maybe 2 generations closer than you are to some of those other people, they're going to get more matches, higher scores with their matches. So think really hard about getting your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, anybody who's a little bit older, and get them to take that test. Because, second bullet, every time you go 1 more generation, a younger generation, you dilute your scores because you're adding another group of people to the mix. Now, let's say you've signed up, and so you know in 4 or 5 weeks you're going to get the result. This is the time to work on your own family tree, perk up as much as you can, add as many cousins, add as many people with surnames that you know, add as many generations. And because this is the rule, the better and more complete your family tree is, the easier it's going to be for you to identify the placement of each match. And so that's why we have a good family tree, because it's going to help us. And so then, just as a thought, get familiar with some of those different surnames among your different cousins, first cousins, second cousins, because those are the same names that you're going to see on your list of DNA matches. This question comes up about whether or not you should post your family tree data. Some people seem to be worried about that. It's not really that much of a worry. You know, if you're interested in privacy and things, you know, there's a dozen other ways that people can find out about you. But if you want to help yourself and help other people, take advantage of that offer and post your information, your family tree. You can certainly, as you post it, you can indicate that certain members of the tree are private. You don't even have to name them, but certainly grandparents, great-grandparents, all those other good people, put their names on the tree, because you're going to help others and you're going to help yourself. And in fact, Ancestry and MyHeritage particularly will immediately give you more help. They will give you more information about your people if you can post a tree. All right, what happens? Your results finally arrive. What do? And you're like the kid in the candy shop because you're going to have literally thousands of matches. And other things to look at, your ethnicity data, your through lines, common ancestors, several very useful things. So take a minute, look around and see a little bit of everything in that candy store. Here is my page where they greet me and say hello. And so here's the front page, and they're telling me all these different possibilities, including I can click on my matches, I can look at my through lines, or I can look at my ethnicity. Now, ethnicity gets an awful lot of press, a lot of talking, a lot of advertisement, and people talk about it with one another. And so what is the ethnicity estimate? That means many years ago, and the different sites are not quite clear, they maybe do it a little different. Maybe this is where your people came from 300 or 400 or 500 years ago. Maybe it's 1,000 years ago. But it's like, where did your ancestors originate? And then they give you percentage numbers. And whenever they put down a percentage, I think you're inclined to believe it because that's a statistic. And so that's where they say, good news, you're 17% Irish, or whatever they say. And indeed, I think many of the DNA kits are sold on that basis to curious buyers who wonder if they're going to wear the kilt or the lederhosen or whatever. And in fact, when people talk around their coffee table and they say, I got my results, what do they talk about? This is it. It is the ethnicity estimate. I would venture to say over 90% of our conversations, when we get that result, that's what it is. Now here, I'm going to make you mad. I'm going to make some of you mad. I'm going to offend some people because I'm going to answer the question the way that you don't want it answered. Because I'm going to say that estimate is not very useful. Now, if you don't know anything about your ancestors, if you're adopted and you know nothing, that's an exception to the rule. But for those of us who have a pretty good family tree, it's not going to help that much. And now I'm going to tell you why. Different companies will give you very, very different estimates, and the same company will change their estimates markedly over time. And so the data cannot be correct if there's 6 different ones telling you different stories. And indeed, I'm in all the different sites. I'm in 5 of them, and they're all giving me very different estimates, and they change their estimates over time. Even if this information were correct, it probably wouldn't help you very much to find your ancestors within the last few years. And so my rule is you are allowed to take one look at that data and then forget about it and never speak of it again. Because people do not believe me very much when I say this, I want to give you some examples. Here's one of my cases. That's just plain vanilla, where they tell me I'm 99%. They might have even said 100% European. And you see the splash effect over there on the right that covers the British Isles and part of Western Europe. Now here's another one where they're showing where my top arrow is in the British Isles. They're giving me 89%. And that's a big chunk. Now, in reality, I know, because I've traced my ancestry back to the 1600s, I know about 2/3 of it really is in Germany, Switzerland, that part of the world. So I'm very skeptical of that 89%. But now here's another estimate, and look at this one. This makes me a little bit Finnish, and where it says English, look at that, 56% this time. And then in the picture, the purple picture, see, I've moved a lot into Eastern Europe. Well, now we're back over here to another one. And here's one that says Great Britain, 5%. Remember I had the other one, 89%? Which one am I going to believe? Well, from time to time, they change those numbers. Now here they are, 70% in England, Wales. And so I could give you more and more examples. I will ask you to trust me, and I will tell you again, forget that business about the value of the ethnicity. Let's look at our matches, because the matches and the data you get from them, that's the heart and soul of the DNA results. You're going to have, and you probably do have, thousands of matches. Most people that I've talked to have many more than my 26,000. I have, and that's because the longer you have people who were in America, the bigger those families and the longer they were. And so I suspect a lot of you have really a lot of DNA matches. So we're going to click on View All DNA Matches, and they start listing them from top to bottom. That first entry, I know that's a nephew of mine. I know that next guy and the next girl, they are first cousins. And so it goes. And so, and their scores are shown. And then in the next column, notice that some of them, it will say, you and that person have a common ancestor. Ancestry has found that information because you posted a tree, so did the other person, and they can put those trees together. They don't know that about my nephew because he didn't post a tree. See that? No tree for him. Now, how many matches do you have? Okay, I suspect you've got the 26 or more thousand. To find out, you click on the Shared DNA tab. That'll give you your total, and it will give you the different kinds. So there's the tab. Click on that. And when I took this screenshot, I was sitting at 25,000. And then below that, see, they'll tell you also how many so-called close matches, fourth cousins or better, and so on. And indeed, you might say, what do I do now with all those thousands of matches? Because we say, does Ancestry have an index? No, they don't. Now, they're going to give you a few things to help with, but they don't give you a real live index. They will tell you for each match, is this a good, strong match or what? Whatever. And they'll give you a few special tools, and we'll talk about those tools. How many matches are really good? Well, the higher ones you're going to get more value out of because you can work with those better. And so you're going to get most of your benefits, say, from your top 1%. And so that's all the ones who score 500, 100, 90, 80, maybe all the way down to about 35, 34, because that's going to, and that's where you're going to find your top, say your top 1%. And then if you go down a little further, all the way down to 20, a score of 20, now you're down to maybe 3%. Now, certainly, I don't want to diminish the fact that certainly a number of lower scoring matches might be also very helpful. Well, Ancestry kind of makes it as easy as they can, in a way, not totally, but to a degree, because they look at those people and did they post trees, and they might tell you, this is your father. He's got a score of about 3,500, or this is a member of your immediate family. And they'll tell you that much. here's an example, not from my own information, but this is what a friend, a relative, a DNA match sent me. In her case, see that top one where the left-hand arrow is, it says, this is JB is your mother. And then down the way, the next one, this JK is your father. So sometimes it's easy, and sometimes people will show you exactly where they fit. And they can do this at least for brothers, sisters, your son, your daughter. So I've kind of alluded to the fact that scores are important. And not only that, but if you tell me what a person's score is, you're also really telling me about where do they fit in the family tree. And so here is a chart that the Ancestry people put together. And of course, the major message is the higher the score, the more reliable and the more certain you are that this is going to be a really good connection. And this is the way, indeed, that the scores show relationships with one another. The top score, right-hand column, I've made a note. The top score is going to top out at about 3,500. And then a nephew or an uncle, they're going to get about half of that because they share half of your gene pool. And so, give or take, their score will be about half of 3,500. And then every time you add another person into the mix, you cut the score by about half. And so that's why a first cousin, on average, gets about 888. And then a daughter or son of that first cousin, who is now a first cousin once removed, you divide by 2, and you keep dividing by 2. And then they go all the way down to a score of 8. And below that, they say, well, maybe that's not totally reliable and could be just an anomalous coincidence. And so they say, that's as far as we go. Now, it would be easy to calculate if the scores were exactly half for each new generation person. Like back here, if on not only on average, but exactly my first cousin scores 888 and his daughter 444, it doesn't work that way because for every new person that comes into the world, there is a recombination, a reshuffling of this DNA so that the new person doesn't exactly get the same kind of half from each parent. Or maybe you only get, say, 23% from one of your grandparents. Things like that happen. And so that will make for the variation in scores, which third bullet, I've noted that is very good for DNA analysis because some people who are getting more than their share from a particular branch of the family, you can find them as 5th or 6th cousins. And that is the real strength of the DNA world. Now, should we look for those high scoring people? Start off with them, absolutely. And in fact, I have found many high scoring matches who descend from, first of all, my grandparents, my great grandparents. And if they post a tree, it's really easy to identify them. Or maybe my own tree is good enough at that level that I kind of should know who my first cousins are. And maybe I should know most of my second, but I probably don't. But it's still fairly easy dealing with first and second cousins. It's going to get progressively more difficult the further out they are. Well, for these first and second cousins, with good luck, they're already in my database. And so for about my first highest scoring, my first 50 matches, I was able to identify those rather quickly. because I knew where they fit, who they were, and so on. And especially if they posted a tree. But as you have probably learned, only about half the people post trees. Now, my question this time is, what's this category called common ancestor? This means that Ancestry has figured out that my first cousin, John Tracy, he and I share a common ancestor, and so they've marked that down. They did not do that for my nephew because he didn't post a tree, so Ancestry has no way of knowing. But Ancestry is good enough to list all of the ones that they can figure out with their massive, what should I call it, their massive data processing capability of all those matches and trees that they can put together and decide who fits where. And so this is what happens. If one of your matches posts a tree and has a person in that tree who matches somebody in your tree, Ancestry knows that, they can figure it out, and they say, make that person a common ancestor. And so it's a great list because Ancestry does it for you. And this gives you really a good jump start to figuring out who is who among all of your matches. But remember, third bullet, you need to have included your own posted data to qualify, and so does the other guy need to post his. A number of mine were in that group. The other side of the coin of common ancestors, they are all placed within through lines. And Ancestry has found over 700 of these people for me. So what a jump start that is. And so now I'm really off to the races because they have found so many people. So at this point, many of my matches, yes, and all we've done so far, we've looked at posted trees and the world of common ancestors and its close relative through lines. And already I've defined about half of my top 100 matches. It was that easy. Now, second bullet, we're coming to the hard part. There were also some high scoring matches who didn't post trees, but they were already in my paper database. I recognize their name. I know where they fit. I know who they are. I add a few of those as well. But there are still a good number that I haven't placed, and these are the unknowns. So now the question is, what can I possibly do to define the unknown matches? Well, I've given you an example. Here's Bella. And Bella he's not posted a tree. And so what am I going to do? Here is the answer. I look to see who he and I both have shared matches with. And so on that page, see where my arrow is going, I'm going to click on shared matches. I've put 5 stars here because this is possibly the most important slide that we will see today. It is the most helpful slide, and it is the most important thing you will ever need to do your good stuff by figuring out who is who among your matches. Now, here's the thought process. Let's say I've got a good match, Abby. Abby matches a lot of other people. I've given them all names starting with A. Abe, Abner, Ace, Addie, and the rest of them. And so Abby, she matches all those good people. And then second bullet, my known matches. I know these people, Abe, Abner, Ace. They all have shared matches with the same gang of people. Now, here's the important part. Addie, marked in green, has shared matches with those same people. but is unknown because Addie did not post a tree, and I cannot really know where Addie fits, except now I know because Addie matches those same people and is obviously in the same subfamily cluster as those other people. And that's why it is an easy placement, because if she has the same shared matches as those people that I already knew who they were and what subfamily group they're in, she goes there too. Now, in real life analysis, it might not be quite that perfect, but it will be perfect enough. And so that's why when we have a sizable group of matches, they're all matching one another, we say, we've got a cluster of people, and they're all in a particular subfamily area. And so you go to the outer circle. We have the ones who are Owens, who are Tracy's, the Ellifrits, the Clark, all of those, we might get a cluster of people. And then my arrow on the right, pointing to the Bruce family, this I single them out because this has been a difficult group for me. And so I've said here, suppose we have several known matches that are all in the Bruce group. Then we've got an unknown. He has the same kind of shared matches. He's got to be a Bruce too. And so that way we can place a lot of unknown people. You need to find those unknown people because over half of the people do not post a tree, and some others post such a tiny tree that it doesn't help. If 60% of your people are unknown, and I've seen this over and over where people say, I'm having the worst time with my data, with my matches, because those rascals don't post a tree and I'm dead in the water. I don't know what to do with them. But you do know what to do with them because of the world of shared matches, and you don't care. But here is the story. This is the most important slide of the day. The 40% are the people that we know about because they've posted their trees, or maybe Ancestry knows they're through line people. But look at that other 60%. They're below the water. They're unknown. And if we do not access those, we're missing out on the majority of our matches. And that's why you absolutely need to use the shared match routine to find some of those 60%ers. Now, does it work out in fact as well as theory? Yes, it does. Amazingly, the different clusters congregate just about the way you think. The Bruce people do not match with the Ellifritses or the Signs or the Hoovers. And certainly they don't match with the Bakers who are on my other side of the house. And so we're going to develop sizable clusters, and you probably have a dozen or more big clusters of these different subfamilies. And maybe you have everybody out there in, say, the third concentric circle. Here's a new question. What if you've got a subgroup that has no cluster? Or you've got a cluster with no subgroups? And I had this. I should have found, if you turn your head sideways, you'll see Samuel Pettis, where the arrow is. I should have found a Pettis cluster, but I couldn't find any Pettis people. But at the same time, I had an unknown cluster. They matched one another, but they didn't fit anywhere. And they certainly didn't fit with the Pettises. Well, it turns out this is, what I had was a non-parental event. Now, do different subgroups get equal representation? You sort of feel like if you should get 50% from both mother and father, 25% from each grandparent, and so on. There should be a certain amount of equality there, but it doesn't work that way because some families, some of the subgroup families are larger or smaller than others. Some have been in America a shorter time period, and that's where we sell these DNA kits. And so they don't all the subgroups do not get equal representation. A new topic, will the surname selection option help? If you're looking for the members of a particular subgroup, the left-hand arrow says I'm looking for the Elifritz people. And so that's the search option where I look for people who have that surname. Either that's their own surname, or I can make it so that if they just include it in a family tree, it will show up. And so that will help us find all of those Elifritz people. And indeed, that's a very useful option. The geographic option is another useful thing. Now here, in this case, it happens I was born in Lincoln, Illinois, and a lot of my Baker people were. And so I say, I want to find all the matches. They match me, and they show something about Lincoln, Illinois in the data that they have posted. And so, you know, it turned out just about all of these people indeed were Baker people who were connected there. So that geographic option also helped me with finding people in some small German towns. Now, people ask this question about, can you only do good out to say about the third or second, you know, not many generations? Can you find people in the fourth or fifth and they are matches and they are like your fifth cousins? Well, it's a problem. And so because on average, now notice the key word here is average, a fifth cousin's only going to maybe score 3.5. The cutoff is 8. Most of the fifth cousins will not even become matches. But because of the recombination, reshuffling, 10, 15% of the people score a lot higher than they should. And with large families and a large pool of people to work with here, you may find, I have found some fifth and even sixth and seventh cousins. And so it can happen that way. So don't let anybody tell you that you cannot find fifth or sixth generation people. Does it help to have access to the results of one of our other matches? See where I've put the blue arrow where it says view another test. I have different cousins who, in particular branches of the family, I find it useful to have access to their data. And they have been agreeable. We push a couple of buttons and we have access to the other guy's data. And so that works out very nicely sometimes. Anything else in the DNA story area that's useful? See, a while ago I said, forget that ethnicity thing. Well, here's a case of where Ancestry is kind of doing a really nice thing. They're showing you mostly based on what you posted. They're telling you where all your people are. I selected, see on the bottom there, the year 1825, and they're showing where the people came from, where they moved to. So there are some useful things here. Now, can we learn anything from our other people that we match? Yes. Ancestry kind of serves as a go-between if you want to send them a message. And sometimes people have more information than you do, particularly on their specific branch of the family. Also, some of them have locked their tree or made it private, and so you need to contact them, and a lot of them are good enough to respond. I'd say maybe 50% of them respond. When all is said and done, will some of the matches still be unknown? If they've got no tree, and maybe they don't even have any shared matches with you, they don't respond to any messages. If that's the case, yeah, we might be stuck. But occasionally you look back, you check again, and maybe things change. Nevertheless, bottom bullet here, this has not been a problem. Only about 2% of my top matches are unknown. And if you can place 90% of them, 98%, that's good enough. Now, does Ancestry have, I've really put it in big, do they have any weaknesses? Oh yeah, they, the worst one is that third bullet. They do not give you a chromosome browser, which we would love to have. They are afraid if they tell you too much, they will have their customers suing them for liability. And so this is what I'm told by an official in the Ancestry company. Ancestry does something with their approach to endogamy. This is the business of a lot of intermarrying, maybe because it's a small population, they all live on the same island or they're isolated some other way. And so you don't want to get confused, and because maybe everybody's related to everybody in that town. And so how do you distinguish being descended from your specific ancestor versus those other people? And so Ancestry considers that in their scoring. The different companies have different scores, a little different. Now they're usually close enough, but for example, FTDNA, if you have people who take all the tests, they'll get the highest score on FTDNA and probably the lowest, most conservative on Ancestry. And the others will be in between. So when you get different scores, you say, who's the most reliable? Well, who's to say? The experts are not in agreement. Some of them would say, you know, you want to be conservative about this. But if you've got a different company, and if that person has specific shared matches and good browser data, maybe it's still a good score. Let's move over to FTDNA. Even though they have fewer matches, they might still do you some good. Now, especially because they're the only guy giving the Y test and the Mito test. And of course, they have a really nice chromosome browser. If you're interested in surname projects, they've got them. They've got, and I'm sure that it's probably way over 8,000 since I took that screenshot. And what about their autosomal test? Yes, they have that too, and they have a chromosome browser that goes with that one. And they will tell you not only your total score, but the score of your longest single block, which is kind of important for identifying, do you really have something going on there? And here's an example of one of my matches. And FTDNA is good enough to tell you exactly where, on which chromosome, and with what score on that chromosome. I mean, they have just really given you detail. So you see on where the arrow, the going across arrow for scores of 49 and 21, those are really big, high scores. So that means for that chromosome 13 and 14, that is important news for that particular match. And that is how we get FTDNA to do their triangulation, where they're going to get at least 3 of us to match all on the same chromosome, the same segment of the same chromosome. So the third bullet here, we'll look at chromosome 13 and 14, because I know that this particular match, I know because I've seen our paper trees, I know who she matches with and who who we have in common. But here I've selected 5 people and I've asked FTDNA to graph it out and show me, and they do. Look down here on chromosome 13 near the bottom, and here color-coded are those 5 different people, and you can't make this stuff up. This is a match made in heaven. I mean, just look at how there is no doubt about it. Those people are all matching superbly well on chromosome 13. And so here is the one I've identified, called her California girl, and she's over there in that Elijah Elifritz area. See, he's out. This is my mother's side of the house. My mother, 1, 2, 3, 4 generations out. And that's where we've got the triangulation. So that chromosome 13 area, we have now identified with the browser. That is almost certainly an Elifritz area. Let's move over to Gedmatch. Do we want to get in the club? Absolutely. It's free and they give you good information. They don't perform the test themselves, but they're going to massage your data. It's free. Now they do have some extra bells and whistles if you want to pay for them, but even the free part, there's plenty of good things here. They have a good array of features and a great browser. And so here's the kind of a list of things that they have. And so they've got their own candy store, so to speak. And so here is my listing of my first page. I've protected the privacy of some people and taken their names away. So, but here you get with, on Gedmatch, you get your top 3,000 matches, and you can click and look at the results for any of those 3,000 people. And then you can click to see where you matched them. Or you can do a little further. Here we're still in Gedmatch, but in this case, I'm saying here I have matched this girl named Christy. Where do we match? Who do we match with? And how much does each of us match? And so this is just for starters. We're not only getting information on who we have shared matches with, but exactly how much. And we can look further and find out exactly where, on which chromosome. In the upper left of this, it shows we're now in chromosome 13. And remember, that's the Elifritz area where a lot of these people are matching, and you can just see pictorially that this really works just really nice. There are also these other companies, MyHeritage, that I'm giving short shrift to. I should give you more about that, but they have a rapidly growing database. It is the second largest now of the different companies that will help us. They have good information, a good chromosome browser. And in fact, they do other special things too. Will 23andMe help? Maybe not as much as the others, but again, maybe I'm just reflecting the fact that it hasn't helped me much of anything. But who knows? You might find a key match right here. Some people who did not take the test on other companies. Hey, we're up to number 50, so we should be very near the end. And yes, we are. And so the conclusion, we come back to our initial question and we'll say, are the results useful? Well, yeah, we've had a lot of success stories, and with it, but sometimes you've got to make a little bit of an effort to make that happen. And I can add my own success stories. I have found enough really solid connections to pretty well justify my paper tree. But marked in red are some of my really good things of where I've been able to extend my tree only because of DNA. Now I've got my final important list here. And I've made the case here of I think the autosomal will do more good for more of us, which is, you know, not to take away from the others because they might help you as well. Ancestry is probably the best one because they've got the most matches. We like it when other people post the tree. If you've not yet done that, be sure to do so. Among your thousands of matches, it'll be your top 1% or top 3% that are the most vital. The through line, the common ancestor thing, that's a good list. And as I said, Ancestry started me off with about 700 of them. I've really given this one, you know, I've given it the best shot I can. And that's because shared matches are absolutely the best feature of every testing company, because that leads to the clusters. It allows you to put your data into subgroups. Some other things along the way that might help: the surname option and the geographic option. Number 8, I made the point that you are not, with DNA, restricted to finding matches first, second, third, fourth cousins. You can find them even beyond that with a little effort and some good fortune and a good paper tree. All these other companies that have their browsers, that is also a helpful thing. So indeed, DNA will be a valuable asset for you. I thank you for your interest and encourage you to continue on with your good DNA activities. Anna, back to you.
Thanks, James. We have some questions here. So Mary asked, is there a handout?
Oh, I can make a handout available. I'll send you one, Anna.
Okay, cool. And then I can post that along on the website, Mary, so that you can get it. I'll have it posted by the end of this week.
Okay.
Unless you have it right now, James.
Let's see. I've got to dig it out, so I'll send it to you in a few minutes.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, you can just send it to me later, and then I'll just post it along with this recording. And then Norda asked, doesn't Find My Past also do autosomal DNA tests?
Say that one again, a little louder and more clear. I have to turn up the volume. We get old, we don't hear so well.
Sorry. Norda asked, doesn't Find My Past also do autosomal DNA tests?
Let's see, autosomal. Yeah, there are some other companies. Living DNA, which I think has now been bought by the British company. But they're very small. They don't have that many matches. So I've certainly listed the ones that have the most matches.
Cool. And that's all the questions. So I will go back to.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I have the, it will be posted on the BYU Family History website. So you just go to the webinars page on the website and it'll be there. And I will share my screen so you can actually see that there. The website, yeah, the website's right there on the screen. So thank you so much for.
It's a pleasure to be with you as always.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. And we hope, thank you, James, that was wonderful. We hope you will join us for our next webinar next week, same time. with Catherine Grant on 5 Minutes or 5 Hours, Stopping Mistakes Before They Start, Family Tree. And then you can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website. If you have any comments or questions, you can always email us at fhl_webinars@byu.edu or follow Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a wonderful week.